Kia ora, everyone, and welcome to Cobblestones Chronicles. It's my delight to be here with you today in the run-up to Christmas. It's very exciting, isn't it? I don't know, for those of you who have small people around, I'm sure that they're getting very excited about the idea of dear old Santa Claus coming up. And we're getting excited too, because it's always fun at Christmas. I think we're all big kids at heart, aren't we? So Cobblestones Chronicles is all about the region. Cobblestones is a regional museum, so it's not just about Greytown and it's not just about that little area, but it's actually about the whole of the Wairarapa. And today I want to talk a little bit about why some of the streets got their names. And I'm using a book written by Gareth Winter, which is absolutely excellent. It's a really good book. So I hope you will enjoy it today when I tell you the history of some of the street names. And to start us off, I'm actually going to play a tune. And this is a tune which was written by the words were written by a poet called Michael O'Leary, who's a very well-known New Zealand poet. He's a quite prolific New Zealand poet, and he's a friend of my husband's, and they went to university together actually, many years ago, and he did mention one day that he'd always thought that a number of his poems would be great if they could be set to music, so they became songs as well. So the two of them got together and wrote the tune for this song. They had to change some of the words a little bit, but this is called At Least Until Eternity, and I hope you enjoy it.
His guitar gently weeping for the world he'd come to save, did his Moroccan musical instrument lament the captive slave, singing doo-wop, doo-wop, dee doo-wop, doo-wop, dee doo-wop, doo-wop, dee doo. Did the Son of God, the Son of Man, son of a virgin woman too, rock and roll with his troubled time, singing doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo, doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo, doo-wop, 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 doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo. Did he pick up David's lyre and sing with the Mary Magdalene in the tavern? Did they rave on the same old song like the likely lads in the cavern, singing doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo-wop, doo-wop, dee-doo. Well, now you're a long time dead, at least until eternity. So sing and relax, just let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Do-wop, do-wop, do-do. Do-wop, do-wop, do-do. do-wop-dee, do. Do-wop-dee, do-wop-dee-wop-dee, do-wop-dee-wop-dee-doo. Do-wop-doo-wop-dee-doo. 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 Do-wop-doo-wop-dee, do-wop-doo-wop-dee. Do-wop-doo-wop-dee-doo.
That was At Least Until Eternity. And as you might have realised, it was a doo-wop song, which they thoroughly enjoyed doing. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how some of the streets in Wairarapa got their names. And I thought I'd start with Featherstone because that is the gateway to the Wairarapa, isn't it, as you're coming north. The pattern of street name employed in Featherstone is quite unique amongst the townships of the Wairarapa. The majority of the names were applied to the streets before they were formed, which is quite unusual. In fact, the streets were carefully laid out on survey maps and named even before the land of Featherstone Township had been sold. The Wellington Provincial Council created the township of Featherstone in map form in 1856. The councillors were convinced of the practicality of establishing a township at the point where the Port Ahuriri Napier Road, then known as the Great Northern Eastern Highway, joined the Wairarapa Plains after crossing the Rimataka Range. Their intention to establish a township at that point must have been an early one, and the land was purchased from its Maori owners in late 1853. And by February 1854, the council had set aside land in the location of Burling's Hotel for a township and suburban land. So many of the streets were actually be called after councillors. And unsurprisingly, the names were those of the Wellington Provincial Council. So Bell Street in Featherstone, it was named after Francis Dillon Bell, a member of the first Wellington Provincial Council. He was born in 1822 in France, where his father was a merchant and consul. His connections with New Zealand began in 1839 when his father's cousin, Edward Gibbon Wakefield, secured him a job in the London office of the New Zealand Company. Bell migrated to Nelson in 1843 and under advice from Wakefield because he would make his fortune here. But he became frustrated by the lack of financial opportunities, and he came to Wairarapa in 1847 when Governor George Grey commissioned him to negotiate with Wairarapa Maori for land purchases. When the New Zealand Company folded in 1850, Bell shifted to the hut and was elected to the first Wellington Provincial Council in 1853. He went on to become a national prominent politician, serving a short time as a Minister of the Crown and also acting as Speaker of the House. Bell was a handsome, charismatic man, witty and charming, but as a politician he is remembered as being verbose and indecisive. He died in July 1898. How nice to have a street named after him. So, I'll play you another song now, and then I'll tell you a bit more about more of the streets in Featherstone. But as we're talking about Wellington a little bit this morning, I've got a song called Paddy the Wanderer. And this is a song about a dog who used to wander along the waterfront, and every now and again he'd hop on a ship and go for a little sail around, but he always returned to Wellington waterfront. And this is a song out of a collection by a chap called Chris Priestley. And Chris has done a fantastic job of collecting New Zealand songs, New Zealand particularly folk songs, and which of course tell stories. So it's always worth listening to the songs of New Zealand because they do tell us stories. So here you go, Paddy the Wanderer.
Paddy was a wanderer. In the Great Depression, he was a friend of the cabbies, workers and the seamen. Paddy greeted sailors in the Wellington harbour, then hitched a ride on trams, boats and steamers. Paddy had a family. Best friend was Elsie, her father was a seaman. They'd all go down to greet him. Elsie caught pneumonia. She was only 4 when she left him. Oh, Paddy, his heart was broken. Paddy crossed the ocean. Many times they say he flew in a gypsy moth. And he went to California, and he had an official title. Assistant night watchman for the pirates, smugglers and the rodents. One day on the radio, sad news was broken, and hundreds were in mourning. In the funeral procession, led by 12 black taxis, all the way to the crematorium for Paddy. No more wandering. Paddy was an Airedale. Now he has a statue, yes, and even a drinking fountain for dogs and for humans, and he'll always be remembered. All those that met him, he was Paddy, Paddy the Wanderer. Remember Paddy, Paddy the Wanderer.
The story of Paddy the Wanderer. It always amazes me how dogs do have another life of their own. They go off wandering. And I try not to let my dogs wander, that's for sure. I want to now tell you a little bit more about another of the streets in Featherstone. And I picked on Daniel Street, spelt Daniell. And Daniel Street is quite interesting because you can find a lot of Daniel streets around the place, and there are even people around called Daniel. So Daniel Street is named after Captain Edward Daniel, who was one of the prominent founding settlers of Wellington. He was a Cornishman, and he was born in Trelissick in 1802 and served in the 75th Regiment of the British Army. He sold his commission in 1839 to invest in the New Zealand Company, and he arrived in Wellington on the Adelaide in 1840. And you notice that he was born in Trelissick. I wonder if that's got something to do with the name of Trelissick Park in Wellington. So Captain Daniel's 1,110-acre grant from the New Zealand Company was not immediately available, so he took up land in Niall, naming his farm after the village of his birth. So that might be why Trelissick is called that. He visited the South Island for the company in 1848 to report on the possibility of establishing the Canterbury settlement there, and the following year was allowed to select 250 acres for each 100 acres he had bought. He selected prime land in the Rangitiki, the area he later was to represent in the first Wellington Provincial Council, and he later sold some of his land to make the township of Bulls. Daniel died in 1866, but he is remembered in the names of streets, because I know there's at least one in Wellington and several others. There was also Brandon Street, and Brandon Street in Featherstone is named after Alfred de Bath Brandon, who was born in London in 1809 and was practicing as a lawyer when he decided to migrate to New Zealand. He arrived on the ship the London in 1840. He was soon working in the law again and was a Crown prosecutor for many years. A supporter of the Settlers' Constitution Party, he was a follower of Dr. Isaac Featherstone. He was elected to the first Wellington Provincial Council and served through the entire life of the council, first representing Wellington City, then later Porirua. For a long time, he also served as a provincial solicitor as well as a member of the House of Representatives. Gosh, he must have been a very busy man. Brandon, who was also very interested in commercial and educational matters, died in 1886. It's interesting how people, the names live on. So, Moore Street in Featherstone. George Moore was born in 1805 and came to Wellington on the Martha Ridgeway with his fellow Wellington Provincial Councillor Alfred Rennell. Once in Wellington, he established himself very successfully as a general merchant. He was a lieutenant in the military during the military actions in the Hutt Valley in 1845-46. He served on the Wellington Provincial Council, but is best remembered for his charitable activities and for his interest in educational matters. He died in October 1877. Rennell Street. So, Rennell Street in Featherstone, Rennell Street in Masterton. There's definitely at least two streets named after Alfred Rennell, who was born in Heybridge in England and came to New Zealand in July 1840 on the Martha Ridgeway. So, same boat. He worked as a carpenter in Wellington and was an undertaker for a period. I think in those days, people often had more than one job that they did because there were so few people. Rennell took up land in the Hutt Valley and in 1849 finished the incomplete Maybe's flour mill at Taita. He worked the mill until it was destroyed in the disastrous flood of 1858. Rennell was a member of the first Wellington Provincial Council as well as serving in the House of Representatives. A strong supporter of all liberal causes, Rennell shifted to Masterton, where he filled many public offices, including becoming the mayor. A colourful and forthright politician and businessman, Rennell died in 1902. Very busy man, and obviously wanted to put things back to his community. Well, how about I play as another song now? I thought I'd play as a song written by my husband, Niels Gedge, called the Plimmerton Waltz. And this song was written, it was about Plimmerton. I know that's not about the Wairarapa, but it's about a homecoming, because this was written because we came home after being overseas for a number of years. And we came home primarily because my New Zealand-born husband was very homesick and decided, you can take the boy out of New Zealand, but you have to bring them back. You can't take New Zealand out of the boy. And we settled in Plympton for a little while, which was a lovely place to live and a lovely reintroduction to New Zealand. So I'll now play the Plympton Waltz.
I have wronged this world, slept in the hay, put my case to the scholars, and laughed with the clouds, rambled the highlands, lived on Suva Bay, buried the past and lived for the day. And the hills last summer were burned bare and brown, and the sun shone all day on their sculpted forms, casting shadows over seas of gold, paradise lost, waiting to be found. One day I chanced to put roots down where the bluff shields the bay and the reef wrecks the wave, and the metro train is a toy down in our town, and the midday siren still calls on Saturdays, and the hills this winter, they were emerald green, and the sun shone all day on their sculpted forms, casting their shadows since time unseen, like paradise lost on lands untold. And the hills last summer were burned bare and brown, and the sun shone all day on their sculpted forms, casting shadows over seas of gold, like paradise lost, waiting to be found, like paradise lost that was mine to behold.
Paradise indeed. Coming back after being away for about 9 years, on and off, and returning to live in New Zealand, first of all in Plympton, which is, of course, a lovely place to be, beside the sea. I'll go on to tell you a little bit more about Feather Streets in Featherston. And there's a street called Revens Street in Featherston, It's quite a small street and it goes up a hill. But it's named after Samuel Revens, who was born in England in 1808. He was the son of a doctor, and he was a radical from his youth and was involved in political agitation in Canada in 1833 to 34, where he helped initiate North America's first daily newspaper. On his return to England, he established a mercantile firm. He became interested in the settlement of New Zealand and started work on the first copy of the New Zealand Gazette in London. In 1840, he came with the first New Zealand Company settlers to Wellington on the Adelaide and published the first New Zealand-based newspaper, the second copy of his Gazette, on the beach at Petone. Later, he took up pastoral and sawmilling interests in Wairarapa, which is why he's remembered in Wairarapa. And as well as becoming involved in political affairs, he's best remembered as the father of New Zealand printing. He died at Woodside near Greytown in 1888 and is buried in Greytown Cemetery. And in fact, at Cobblestones, we are so lucky because we have a print shop and we have a couple of old printing presses which we can use. And if you would be interested in learning in how to use printing presses and perhaps demonstrating them, because we have the typefaces, we have everything that you would need, please do get in contact with us because our current printer, Tony, is retiring finally. He's well into his 80s now and he's finding it a little bit much. So we would love to hear from you if you're interested in printing and would like to learn about it, because he would love to pass the baton on. And we have a lot of material at Cobblestones about printing, and we're looking at how we can celebrate some of the early things that happened in Greytown, because in fact the Maori newspapers were printed in Greytown as well as other newspapers. So we want to do more to celebrate that, and we're looking at how we can do it. So if you know anything or if you're interested, get in touch with us through our Facebook page or just phone the Cobblestones number and leave a message for me, Janette, and I'll get in touch with you soon. So, now what else? About Cobblestones. I must remind you all that on Saturday, the 17th of December, we are going to have carols at Cobblestones, which is always a wonderful, wonderful evening. We've got the Blue School coming to entertain us with some Waiata, I believe, which is just delightful. We got a young woman called Maddie Slater, who's a young local woman with the most beautiful voice. She's going to come and sing us a couple of Christmas songs. Then we're going to have the Vicky Clayton Band, who are well known in the Wairarapa now because they've been over here quite a few times. They're coming over to do their Christmas carols and Christmas songs, and it will be lots of good old sing-along songs. So you'll be able to join in and sing your heart out to the Christmas carols. And then to finish up, we've got a new band from Kuranui College called Non-Applicable. They're an all-girl band and they are going to give us a rocking out finish to carols at Cobblestones. It will just be a great evening. And of course, you'll be able to buy a festive wine or two or beer, festive beer. You'll be able to buy some delicious food, so you can come and have a picnic on the grounds and spread the blanket out, enjoy yourself. Now, if the weather is windy, it will be fine. But if it's pouring with rain, if it's raining, please do give us a call and just check. Or check out our Facebook page, because it's obviously it's not going to happen if it's pouring with rain, but we're keeping our fingers crossed for really nice weather. So make sure you come along and see us. Be great fun. Okay, so Christmas really is a time for families, isn't it? And it's a time to get together with your family. And I want to play a song written by Chris Priestley, which is about his great grandmother and his grandmother, because his great grandmother had been in Calcutta, and his grandmother used to tell him stories. So this is about the story. You know, there's so many stories in New Zealand of our families, our ancestors, and this is quite, I think, quite typical, because there were settlers who came to New Zealand for a better life. So here we go, the story of Lily and Maud.
Sitting with my nana on a porch in Ardmore Road. She told me a mother's story once, Calcutta long ago. Maharaja funeral pyre, a young girl meant to die. She hid behind the banyan tree, face that fire. This is about changing countries, changing a life, changing generations in these changing times. Turmeric and saffron, cardamom and cloves I smell, the scent of spices in the air on a porch in Ardmore Road. Mother's life could have ended there. Then the soldier came. He would take her by the hand with love and joy, no shame. He smuggled her to England, a family they would raise. I was the youngest girl of 5. Lillian's my name. This is about changing countries, changing lives, she said, changing generations, living and the dead. Turmeric and saffron, cardamom and cloves are still smell Nana's perfume in the air, the porch in Ardmore Road. Story could have ended there. Then the soldier came, gently took me by the hand. Soon I changed my name. We took a boat from England Around the world we roamed, we raised our loving family, called New Zealand home. This is about changing countries, changing a life, she said, changing generations, the living and the dead. Turmeric and saffron, cardamom and cloves I smell, the scent of spices in the air, on a porch in Ardmore Road.
The story of Lillian Maud, Chris Priestley's great-grandmother and grandmother. And it's so often the story about people coming to New Zealand from very different places. So, talking of people coming to New Zealand, onwards with the street names in Featherston. So, Schultz Street. Charles William Schultz was, despite his German name, a Scotsman, and there are an awful lot of Scots who came to New Zealand. He was born in 1818 in Edinburgh, where his family had been living for over 100 years. He married a sister of the Weller brothers, George, Joseph and Edward, and in 1840 migrated to New Zealand to manage their extensive whaling and commercial operations in Otago. And, of course, the Wellers were well-known whalers, and you might well have heard When the Wellerman Comes song, which is about the whalers waiting for the weatherman to come, the ship to come in and replenish their supplies. When the Weller holdings diminished, Schultz came to Wellington, where he successfully operated a flour mill at Kaifora for 20 years. As well as serving on the Wellington Provincial Council, Charles Schultz was an officer in the militia and was a pioneer Freemason. He died in 1879, and the street named in his honour at the time of the survey of Featherston was renamed Birdwood Street soon after the outbreak of World War I, which often happened with anything which sounded German, even if it wasn't really. We also have Waite Street, and Robert Waite was born in Jedburgh, Scotland, another Scot, in 1816. As a young man, he journeyed to London, where he was employed in the Lord Mayor's office, and he came to Wellington in 1840 and commenced business as a merchant and auctioneer. He was elected a member of the first Wellington Provincial Council, and he was also one of the first sheep station owners in the South Island. He shifted to Littleton, where he had established a branch of his company. However, his health failed in 1862, and he sold up all his business interests. He died in 1866. Over the years, the street named after Councillor Robert Waite, spelt W-A-I-T-T, has undergone a spelling change to become Waite, W-A-I-T-E Street. So, don't quite know why that happened, but it's an interesting fact. And then, of course, there's Wakefield Street. So, Edward Gibbon Wakefield was a charismatic proponent of the scheme to settle New Zealand under a colonisation plan based on high land prices. Wakefield was born in 1796, and by the time he promoted his plans for controlled colonisation, he had already served a prison sentence for abducting an heiress and marrying her as a money-making venture. Poor girl. He was involved in colonisation schemes in Canada and South Australia before promoting New Zealand settlement through the New Zealand Company. But he didn't come to New Zealand until 1853. However, he was immediately elected to the Wellington Provincial Council, where he quickly became a force in opposition to Dr. Isaac Featherstone. Although Edward Gibbon Wakefield was a man of great vision, he was hampered by the perception he would use any means to meet his goals. He died in May 1862. His only son, Edward Jerningham Wakefield, also served on the Wellington Provincial Council from 1857 to 1861. The younger Wakefield came to New Zealand with his uncle, Colonel William Wakefield, in 1839 on the Tory, and worked for the New Zealand Company. He is now best remembered for his publication, Adventure in New Zealand, a lively if somewhat egocentric view of the early days of settlement, particularly in Wellington and Wanganui. His life was one of unfulfilled promise, and he died in obscurity in 1879. And then we've got Wallace Street. And of course, my family name is Wallace. I'm Janette Wallace Gedge. And John Howard Wallace was born in 1816. Arriving in Wellington in January 1840, he commenced business as a general merchant and served on the town board, the Wellington City Council and the Wellington Provincial Council. He wrote a short history of New Zealand and collaborated on Brett's History of New Zealand. He has the unusual distinction of having 3 Wellington streets named after him, John, Howard and Wallace. A tale used to be told of Wallace's arrival in Wellington. It is said he was one of the first 2 men to step ashore from the ship. When he and the other new arrival saw a row of native pigeons sitting along the branch of a tree, they lifted the guns and shot simultaneously. Both killed a bird. And actually, because the pigeons didn't know about guns, they were sitting targets, literally. They just sat there and let themselves be shot, which is why they are now a protected species. Thank goodness, because we want to be able to see them in the future. Now, I thought I'd play a song from the Windy City Strugglers, because today is a very windy day outside, I noticed as I was coming here. So I've got a song called On the Road Again, which is the Windy City Strugglers, who are well-known blues and jazz band in Wellington in the 70s, 80s, 90s. So here we go. The Windy City Strugglers.
tennis hat. Next thing you wanna know, where's your husband at? She says, I don't know, he's in the pen. Well, come on, Mom, we'll hit the road again, on the road again. Sure as you're born, natural born, he's been on the road again, hit the road again. Sure as you're born, natural born, he's been on the road again. Come on, Mama, hit the road again.
On the road again. And if you're travelling over the next few weeks, please do take care. It's a terrible time for road accidents over the Christmas period. Every year it is really bad, and it must be the most difficult time of year to have to go and tell family that someone has either been seriously injured or has been killed in a road accident. And we don't want to have to remember Christmas like that. So please drive carefully for over the next few days, and over the next few weeks, actually. This Christmas time is a lovely time of the year, but we do want to be a little bit more careful, and certainly not drinking and driving, that's for sure. Because no matter how well you think, oh, well, it doesn't really affect me, a few seconds can make all the difference. So that's enough of that. So we've got Carols at Cobblestones coming up on the 17th of December, which is fantastic. And in the new year, we're going to have some new exhibits opening up. We're having the stables will finally be refurbished, and all the explanation panels will be up, and we've got some more hands-on things that you'll be able to do. So looking forward to talking about that, and I'll have someone come in, Joseph, who has been leading that project, will come in. He's one of our trustees, and have a chat about it early in the new year. Then later on in January, Graham Gray is going to come in and have a chat with me about the last big project at Cobblestones, which is putting together the two sheds and making a really good exhibit space for the horse-drawn vehicles, because the horse-drawn vehicles are such a feature of Cobblestones, and so they were so important to the development of the Wairarapa and the whole of the Wairarapa, in fact the whole of New Zealand. So we're going to have a beautiful new facility so that you'll be able to see them and people will be able to experience them as well. I think it's really important that we do this. And now that, thanks to Greytown Trustlands Trust, who are a landlord of a large part of the ground that Cobblestone sits on, we now have security of tenure. So we're going to be there for the next 99 years at the grand rent of $1 a year. I think we'll manage to do that. And it's a great relief to us who are trustees and the volunteers at Cobblestones, because it means that our work is secure, and because we will never be a commercially viable proposition. We just don't get enough visitors coming through, no matter how hard we try. And we do work on voluntary labour. So remember that when you come to Christmas to Carols at Cobblestones, because we will be asking for a small koha entry, just whatever you can afford. It really does go towards the upkeep of the beautiful facility that it is, and to the upkeep of the history of the Wairarapa region. So remember that when you're coming on through. So that's about it for today. I'll just play you one last song, because I've got another road song. I thought this would be quite fun to play. It's a bluegrass version of On the Road, and it's by a young group called You, Me, Everybody, who are fantastic musicians, and I really enjoy watching them play. So I'm going to play On the Road Again by You, Me, Everybody.
Daddy was a sinner, and Mama sang it lonesome. Went out on her own, son. No one left at home. Sister was a fighter. She knew we had to leave them. Packed her bags in equal shares. Went out on the road. Nights are always safer moving on the road. Daylight's when it's safe enough to rest. Moving till we find the safest place to go, if that exists. Who knows? Brother, so it's simple. You win the game or lose it. Keep fighting till the other man quits, was all he'd come to know. One night he took a gamble and left the leaving too late. Now he's a warden of the state, forcing us to go. Nights are always safer moving on the road. Daylight's when it's safe enough to rest. Moving till we find the safest place to go, if that exists. Who knows?
So that was On the Road by bluegrass group You, Me, Everybody. And that's it from me for this week. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for listening. You can get in touch with me through Cobblestone's Facebook page or by leaving a message for me at the office on the phone number. And wishing you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and a safe holiday season. Thank you for listening. Bye now.